All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today, remember the past, let me see, 2 days, we went over this page, فَإِن كَذَبُوكَ فَقُلْ رَبُّكُمْ ذُو رَحْمَةٍ وَاسِعَةٍ. But the tafsir that we had done, it was more of, the first one was more of a surface tafsir for the words and what the words are saying. And then in the second time, we're looking at it as an inspirational tafsir, if you could say. So that would be the first one was really trying to translate and explain the wordings, their connections together, and all of that. And the second one, an inspirational one. Then the third one, which is today, this is going to be going back to Tafsir al-Qurtubi, because this is where the real cooking happens. This is where you gather all these different I would say ingredients and the lugha Arabiya, and you've got the qira'at, and you've got the different opinions between scholars in regards to a number of different things. That's really where the real work happens. Okay, so let's see. قُلْ فَلِلَّهِ الْحُجَّةُ الْبَالِغَةُ. And we said that al-Qurtubi was saying that al-Hujjatu al-Baligha, that was his point of, I guess, his point of focus, that we're talking about al-Hujjatul Baligha, basically meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically sent all the different evidences that are necessary to know the truth, to find the truth, to recognize the resources, to recognize the references, basically, from the open book to refer to basically the revelation. So remember this, you've got the open book and the revelation. I don't want to call it a closed book, because in English that would have I guess a different kind of a connotation, but I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so when you're looking at al-Hujjatul Baligha, there's one side to it, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that the Quran itself, or the written book, the revelation that is, basically was sent to refer you to see the open book, to see the open book as in nature, as in the galaxies, as in the world, as in life, for you to see through that the magnificence of the Lord Almighty, and that sense nature itself, or your own intelligence or science itself, is not capable of helping you connect these dots for you to know, well, what is really behind this creation, and think of it as God. There's no way that your brain is going to be capable of reaching the answer that it is God, or some kind of a divine essence. Why not? Well, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent you the prophets and the messengers. All your brain is going to be capable, or your intelligence or science is going to be capable of getting to, is really that this world is far more complex than getting created by itself or being made by itself, and that there is something that is beyond this creation. That's basically it. That's all you're going to get to. But anything about God Almighty, your own intelligence is not capable of getting any information about that, because your brain was designed to research matter in motion, to research matter, to research based on experiment, etc. And the Lord Almighty is beyond matter, beyond space, beyond place, beyond time, and certainly beyond matter. And therefore, the Lord Almighty is not going to be within your scope of research. So since the Lord Almighty is not within your scope of research, that's why the Lord Almighty sent you basically the information that your own brain is not going to be capable of finding, or at least of getting enough information. All your brain can do is really recognize the information that the revelation had basically informed you of, and then you can connect those. So you needed the two kinds, which is the open book, and you also needed the revelation to help you understand it. Now, when you say al-hujjatul baligha, this definitely is not necessarily saying that everything and that the Quran that is being a revelation, that everything is basically mentioned in there. No, because there's some information that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had kept as not something that was disclosed for us. So things as his ilm and his will, or things like his own words on certain things. All right, this is all ghaib. This is all considered as part of the unseen. When we say unseen, that would mean we're speaking about something that you are not capable of getting that type of information through experiment or through that. So that becomes ghaib. Okay. And لا يطلع عليه العبد. So you're talking about that the servant himself is not capable of getting to that information, and therefore the Lord Almighty may select certain prophets or messengers or certain angels to let them know of that information. And that's basically his hikmah on what he basically what he wants to disclose and for who. So we did talk about some things as well about al-Mu'tazila. We didn't go in details, but we said that there were different groups, different cults, different groups that existed at certain point in history. And sometimes you will have some traces of certain people during our times, but the most important groups that I guess existed back in the day and still exist today are, number one, you're talking about Ash'ari and Ahl al-Hadith. So those two are pretty much the strongest in their remains. And I would say for al-Ash'ari, it was really the strong school of al-Azhar that basically continued al-Ash'ari and their aqidah there. Just an idea about al-Ash'ari, all right, they definitely refer the text. It's not that they don't. I know Ahl Hadith like to think of them as they don't, but they definitely have, let's say, a special emphasis as well on logic, and use logic sometimes to and that's that area, I would say, of tension between Ahl al-Hadith, and Ahl al-Hadith consider that no, we're just going to let the reference, the text itself, basically speak for itself. We're not going to get into any form of our own intellect getting into the way. Sometimes, these tensions can really go really heated, even during our time. I mean, really, really heated, unfortunately. But I would, I remember when I wanted to register Gems of Light with certain Islamic institutions, they had asked that we would teach the Ash'ari, that we would teach how dangerous the Ash'ari madhab is. And I personally refused. I refused to make that as our place of emphasis. And I felt that to emphasize it in that way, and that this is extremely dangerous. And I felt that, what we really need is certainly the aqidah that definitely I'm Ahl al-Hadith in terms of aqidah, there's no question about that. But in terms of certain things that may have affected fiqh, etc., I may sometimes consider that using or at least depending and revering some of the Ash'ari madhabs are also important. So you've got some scholars, by the way, got great and magnificent scholars, I would say, that are Ash'ari, even though some don't want to really admit that. But you're talking about Nawawi, you're talking about, well, Qurtubi himself has a lot of Ash'ari in him. Okay. You're talking about Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, you're talking about some of the greatest scholars. And even for Ahl al-Hadith, they will recognize that these are great scholars, that you cannot deny their ilm. Okay. But I would not whatsoever revive this debate in an institution like Gems of Light. And I feel that by bringing this debate in a way that that heats up the argument rather than presents the argument, I'm actually against it. I think what we need to do is unite the ummah. Yes, it's okay to present that this is what this aqidah says, and that's what that aqidah says. This is my selective, and what I think is the preponderant, but I would not whatsoever bring this debate in a way to add on to that fuel than bring better communication within the society. This is what I think within the Muslim Ummah. I think we have enough divisions. Hasina, go ahead, dear.
Sheikha, I wanted to ask, you just said madhab, so the different aqidas, we call them madhab as well?
Well, yes, you can consider it's more of a school, but you can call it madhab as well. Madhab is usually referred and usually used in fiqh, but not exclusive to that. So you can have the school of al-Ash'ari. They don't like to see themselves as well, neither does the other group. They don't like to see themselves as a, I guess, a group like that, but they'd like to see themselves that they are what Islam says and nothing but what Islam says, and that the other groups are basically the ones that are deviant. I don't want to get into that debate, but yeah, I'll just leave it at that. All right.
I just wanted to ask Sheikha because these days I have these questions in mind, and I wanted to ask, is it only these two aqidas, or
No,
there is more?
there are many. You will have certain groups that will refer to themselves as Mu'tazila. So yeah, there are certain groups that may have the Mu'tazilita aqidah, and you may have, like for example, the Sufis are generally Ash'ari. Okay, Sufis are definitely generally Ash'ari. A lot of this did mix with political groups and or at least different groups. So when you're talking about Ahl al-Hadith today, they would be really represented in a Salafi group, but even the Salafis, they're not one Salafi, they're actually multiple Salafis. So you're talking about a Salafi of you're talking about a Salafi of generally like the different schools in Egypt, whether you're talking about a secondary schools or whether you're talking about other schools of Ibn Baz, you're talking about Ibn Uthaymeen, or you're talking about Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq in Kuwait, you're talking about al-Albani, or you're talking about al-Madkhali, which definitely not me. No, definitely. Madkhali is something that I am totally against. This is probably the most school I would say no to. But all the other schools, I'm like, okay, I can discuss that one, but definitely not al-Madkhali, because that is nothing but a tool in certain government's hands. So yeah, this is not at all referring to the text as or even Islam itself, as much as it is a government made. And what I mean by government made, I mean it is nothing but an agenda. It's nothing but an agenda. So Madkhali, I would not even consider it as part of Salafi, even though they still call themselves so. But I'll just put it within this
So
class.
Ahl al-Hadith and Salafi is interchangeable terms, right, Sheikh, if I'm not mistaken?
During our
That's what I
modern
understood.
times, yes, but there are certain people that are Ahl al-Hadith that do not whatsoever consider themselves as necessarily Salafi. So just a note.
Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is also another term that we can
So
interchangeably use.
Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, think of it as more of the group that is the counterpart of Shi'ism usually. Okay. That's Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. But Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, then they, then it became later on a political claim. During our times, I'll say, it became a political claim. So you'll have the Shias, the Ash'ari will consider themselves that they're the ones that are Ahl Sunnah, and then the other ones will say, no, we are those Ahl Sunnah. But in general, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in general would be the Muslims that basically consider that the reference is the Quran, is the Sunnah, basically the Sahaba as well, the Sahaba as a group and not necessarily selective Sahaba as a group, whether we're talking about Uthman, Umar, or Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and the other references, we're talking about other Sahaba, Sayyid Aisha, we're talking about Abu Huraira, we're talking about, those other Sahaba. So you're talking about that being raised more of a counter, what should I call it, as a group to counter the rise of Shi'ism, which chose to be selective in which references in terms of figures, in terms of Sahaba, to consider as valid references, in which Sahaba to consider as invalid, and in fact as rejected references. And in particular, speaking about the names that I had mentioned, whether it's Abu Bakr Siddiq, or whether it's Umar ibn al-Khattab, Uthman bin Affan, and certainly Sayyidah Aisha, you're talking about Abu Huraira, you're talking about a number of different selected names that they considered are supposed to be outcasts. So they would also see the Khilafah, like al-Umayyah, as something that they were definitely seeing it as nothing but not an Islamic Khilafah. So you're seeing a group that really had it was a small group, but then grew, and it was supported later, I would say, politically by a choice that was made by a 16-year-old boy, believe it or not. It was a 16-year-old boy in Iran. Iran was generally from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but it isn't until this 16-year-old boy that basically was convinced into Shi'ism and then brought these Shia scholars from Qum and in Najaf al-Ashraf, basically, and then forced the Shia madhab into his kingdom within the area of basically Safawiyin right there, and that changed things in history. So just see that, and that's why we have to go and look beyond the area that we're in and really see, how did history affect what we see today? So yeah,
I'm really sorry, it's not related to the Tafsir class, but I just wanted to ask Sheikh, Shia, do we call them Muslims? I mean, I'm really not educated in this topic.
Right, fair enough. So in general, with Shias, they are considered Muslim because generally they believe in the Quran, they believe in the Prophet ﷺ, they believe, certainly they have their selected, let's say, choice of figures, which they would consider as the choice that is valid to pass on the information about the Prophet ﷺ. So they'll have they don't believe in Bukhari, they don't believe in Muslim, they'll have their own Bihar al-Anwar, and they'll have their own selected books that would be their hadith books as references. So they are considered Muslim, but of course, then it depends on which group you're really talking about, because there's a huge difference between speaking about certain groups that will say that the Quran is incomplete. Okay. If this person, they're going to say they're going to call themselves Shia, but they're calling and claiming that the Quran was incomplete. Well, that definitely is taking this person out of the fold of Islam and putting them in the fold of either kafir or mubtada. So you're looking at, depends on which group you're talking about. So if you're talking about Ismailiyah, they have a completely different definition of understanding of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So they'll have a God in the space, or a God in the sky, and a God on earth. And then they'll have all these different selected things that they were definitely influenced by perhaps the Hinduism or different philosophies. And then you ended up really having a completely different Islam. But when you're talking about Shias, you're talking about Zaydi, you're talking about Ja'fari or Imamiyya, you're talking about different groups that even within the Ja'fari or within the Imamiyya, like for example, you're talking about different groups in the way that perhaps maybe the Shias would in the Shias that are living in Lebanon or even in Iraq. They definitely have a different type of a practice compared to the ones in Yemen or perhaps the ones in Iran. So you're seeing certain differences, and those differences would be important to scrutinize before we would say, okay, all Shias are, or at least Muslim, or all Shias are kafir or mubtada, etc. It would really be based on the groups and based on individuals, and not necessarily, as a general, I would say a title that I would necessarily just give to all the groups and say they are Muslim or they are kafir. Especially when you're talking about Shias, the ones that are not religious, they tend to be they tend to, and what I mean by not religious, I mean they will consider,
Practicing.
well, they're not into this type of Husseini thing and this type of uh, anti, like for example, the ones that were considering it as a religious sect and therefore committing all those massacres in Syria. They were really taking it that it was not any type of a religious thing, but it was considered as a type of extremist ideology that had seen that all these Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah were basically supposed to be their place of target and therefore killing every single person. So they were the ones that were practicing takfir. As for Muslims, is this definitely going to be considered within the realm of kufr? Well, killing a Muslim is not kufr, but it's a sin. But the second that you go and cause all this type of aqidah that's gone really extreme in giving it a religious interpretation, well, then we're actually discussing a completely different area. Then we're talking about a danger here that is definitely being very bloody. We're talking about massacres. We're talking about rape in large numbers. You will let the Syrians, and they'll tell you all the things that they had seen and witnessed that is beyond description, beyond words. And then we would say, well, wait a minute. Are we really going to just think of it as, yes, some religious interpretation, or is this going way too far and definitely taking, even if the person were to say, like, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and that's it, or even believing, like a Nusayriyah, for example, they would believe that Ali ibn Abi Talib himself is God. Well, if you believe Ali ibn Abi Talib, they call themselves Shia, or at least they call themselves as belonging to that sect. Is that going to be Muslim? That
Of
contradicts the
course,
whole
no.
creed. Exactly. You see what I mean? What I'm saying? Or even believing that, the main, I would say that the main crux of all of this is believing that the Quran is incomplete, and that there's going
Mm-hmm.
to be one day this guy that is hiding in a sirdab, okay, that is going to come out and actually bring the rest of the incomplete Quran, or at least bring the rest of the Quran that was basically supposed to be part of this. So when a person believes that, then what really left of their Islam is a place of question. Well, then definitely that's kufr on the
Sheikha,
Yep, go
we
ahead.
have a helper here at home, and she is Ismailia, and I asked her. She believes in Rasul Sallam as a prophet, and the Quran is complete, but she prays differently. What would you say
So
about her?
the prayer, I know I used to be a chaplain. We had a lot of Shias. So those, the prayer being a little different, they would tap at the end for, doing certain adhkar, basically, and they would have a small stone that they would pray on, which basically is from the land of Karbala. And so those details, that doesn't necessarily make their salah invalid. Okay, that doesn't make their salah
Mm,
invalid. These little details, it just puts it within the realm of bid'ah,
mhm,
not necessarily the area of completely invalid. Okay, so
mhm.
they'll do
Jazakallah khairan.
2 sujuds, they'll do certainly, they'll put their hands on their side, and they'll have the Karbala stone. So they'll have certain differences, but and in certain adhkar, but that doesn't get them out of the fold just because of that particular thing. Okay.
Mhm.
So they're still Muslim, but unless they had, individuals, they basically would then curse the Sahaba. Then, hey, you're putting yourself right there at the break of getting into that kufr. Because even the Sahaba, when you're cursing the Sahaba, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically called him as صاحبه إذ يقول لصاحبه لا تحزن إن الله معنا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called him that he was a companion for the Prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had informed the Prophet about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and how he was endorsed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So once you contradict Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's
And
endorsement, or
and Maulvi
even
is
the
also
endorsement,
one of the small Mubashira.
what about who?
Bakr Siddiq, he's also one of the small Mubashira. He got the good news
Oh,
of Jannah.
absolutely. Absolutely. When you're, same thing with Sayyidah Aisha, for example, the ayah was revealed in regards to Sayyidah Aisha, that she was basically innocent from hadithat al-ifk, but to still call Sayyidah Aisha as a prostitute, well, then you just contradicted the Quran right there. You just contradicted the Quran right there. Just a note, throughout history, we did have certain scholars that were accused of tashayyu, like Imam al-Nasa'i, for example, was accused of tashayyu. But let me explain one thing. The tashayyu at the time
Sheikh, I'm
was,
sorry, what's the shayo?
okay, tashayyu is basically Shi'ism, that they were adopting Shia, at least Shia thoughts and Shia, I guess, choices. But and that's what I want to explain. At the time, what that was meaning is that they had considered that Ali ibn Abi Talib was revered as, or as, respected, perhaps more than Uthman ibn Affan. That's what they used to mean by tashayyu, that Ali ibn Abi Talib was supposed to be the third Khalifa and is considered as more important, whether it's the third Khalifa meaning Uthman bin Affan, or whether it was even let's call it a more extreme Shia to consider it, well, he was more worthy of being the Khalifa even more than Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. All of that was considered as part of the Shayyur, but never was it considered as to the level that we see extremism today, and making that cursing Abu Bakr as-Siddiq or Umar ibn al-Khattab as a way, in a form of prayer, that was part of that Shi'ism that the scholars like al-Bukhari would consider as one of some of the shuyukh. Absolutely not. Those were extreme ones, that they did not even exist in this level of extremism in hate towards the Sahaba. Those were extremely rare. But I would say today, and one of the main reasons why it is becoming, I would say, a misconception, a growing misconception within certain communities, is for a number of different factors. Number one is certainly Iran takes that adoption of Shi'ism as part of its own identity. So that's one thing. Number two is that Iran considers that, what we're supposed to be adopting is something that is different, and therefore think of it as an emblem, think of it as a banner, that we are basically supposed to be counterparts to the other groups, and therefore we don't want to be like them. There's also that political part where, of course, they would see that Turkey as basically the Sunni bloc that traces all the way to the Uthmani Khilafah. I know it's really ironic that they would think of it that way, but certainly, okay, and that they would see themselves as the Safawi, and therefore they would consider that, at least Iran would consider that, in order to grow in their imperialist, or at least in their power within different groups, they will put different agendas in order to flourish, to spread, and to basically connect different groups, whether spreading Shi'ism in Morocco, in North Africa, in African countries, in different groups. And certainly it became right now as an agenda that, think of it as just like Zionism, when the Zionists basically had spread the ideas within the Protestant Christians, and they considered that, this is going to be the way to support us. That's the same thing that Iran considered. Iran considered that if we manage to make different groups adopt the Shia madhab, then what we would be creating here is allies. We would be creating alliances with different groups, and therefore these countries would then become united with us and would basically be belonging to our own bloc. So when you're looking at Iran right now, is Iran necessarily religious? Well, I mean, the country itself is adopting a religious appearance, but on the inside, is it necessarily so? I don't know, to be honest. You would really need to get, a specialist on Iran issues, but I'm just, talking in general about the different factors why it's becoming a misconception that people are confused about. So that's one thing, or at least that political side.
Sheikh, just to make this point clear, there is one correct aqidah, and that's Ahl Hadith, right?
What was that?
I just wanted to be sure if I got this point correct, that there's one right aqidah, and that is Ahl al-Hadith, right?
There's only one right aqidah, and that is Ahl al-Hadith. Okay.
I mean, I understood.
Okay. Let me, you took me to a different, we should discuss that some other time. That would actually need a video on its own. Okay. So okay, I'll explain what she's referring to, but so the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned that the Ummah is going groups. All of them are in hellfire except one. Now, here's one thing. Does that mean that all the other groups are going to be in hellfire, or is this talking about all the other groups in terms of the context of this hadith is that the Prophet ﷺ had said that the Yahud, they basically went and divided into 71 sects. The Christians divided into 72, and the Muslims divided into 73. So that 73, is this one كلها في النار إلا واحدة? Is this talking about كلها meaning all of them, meaning the 73? Or is this talking and referring to the 71 and the 72 that Jews and the Christians basically not being in meaning the 73 divisions? This is that wahida. Okay, so that's that whole debate. And then you've got other scholars would say, well, no, this is كلها في النار إلا واحدة, considering that this is referring to the nearest noun that was mentioned, and this was talking about the 73. Therefore, this would be talking about one particular group within Islam itself. And therefore, things like Mu'tazili would be not, and things like Ash'ari would be not, or things like this, or even the Ash'ari would say, no, we are the ones that are basically within this hadith. And the Ahl hadith will say, no, it's basically us. And then there goes that debate right there. Okay, so this is why it's important to understand Aqidah, understand Islam, understand the Quran, understand the Sunnah, and basically get into making sure that we adopt the text itself and not necessarily adopt the political adoptions or the political, I would say, agendas or indoctrination. This is extremely important. That we would basically stay within this realm of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So did I explain it, or does it need further explanation?
No, I get it. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you very much.
All right, let's continue right there. So قُلْ هَلُمَّ شُهَدَاءَكُمُ الَّذِينَ يَشْهَدُونَ. Okay, I can see somebody writing something. Oh, okay. All right, there we go. قُلْ هَلُمَّ شُهَدَاءَكُمُ الَّذِينَ يَشْهَدُونَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَ هَذَا فإن شهدوا فلا تشهد معهم ولا تتبع أهواء الذين كذبوا بآياتنا والذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة وهم بربهم يعدلون. So this is basically, hold on, let's basically see it right there. So this is the ayah right there. Okay, let's see. So قُل, and when you say قُل, this is basically telling the Prophet ﷺ. In other words, it's an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to tell the Prophet ﷺ to make this as an announcement. But wait a minute, isn't the whole Quran basically قُل, isn't the whole Quran basically that order for him to basically explain it, to basically inform the people of it? So why say قُل again? The whole Quran is a قُل anyways. In other words, the whole Quran is basically within that area of informing us. Well, sure, that is true, but when you basically look at this qul, it puts in, let's call it, a stronger emphasis in certain areas in the ayat in order to say, well, this is what I want you to say, and this is basically now another emphasized order of delivering that message. So I want you to tell them and say, and exactly that quote in that way. So when you say qul, that also definitely directed at the Prophet ﷺ, but that also lets us know as ones to read the Quran that you as a da'iya, as a Muslim, that you also carry on that mission, and you basically demonstrated, whether in words or whether demonstrated in action, or whether demonstrated in its psychology, in somewhat, I don't want to use the word superior because that carries a connotation of, being condescending, but I will say of confidence. Speak in confidence, speak in a language that recognizes that the words themselves carry all that hujjah, all that evidence, all the weight of ultimate truth, and therefore you speak it in this type of confidence, you speak it in this type of language that carries within it Allahu Akbar. This is, this is just in short of what we could see in the word qul. Okay, so let's see. Qul, so who was he supposed to be telling? Was he supposed to be telling the disbelievers or the Muslims, or who was he supposed to be right there directing the words at? So here he says, قُلْ لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Now, one thing in Lugha Arabiya, the Arabic structure, okay, the sentences themselves, they use a lot of the pronouns, and then the sentence or the context itself would basically speak to me of who that is within the sentence. So I would look at the context, and then the context in itself is going to contain all the different details of what really is the subject and who is the object and so forth. So we would look at the context. So the context right there is explained by al-Qurtubi, that the Prophet ﷺ, based on the context within the ayat, قُلْ لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, tell those mushrikeen and the disbelievers, basically let them get their witnesses. But here, of course, this isn't talking about a witness meaning a figure, but this is talking about shuhada'akum, meaning the different evidences that support your argument. This is what it's talking about. Now, what's the difference between shahada and the ra'i, or even a ru'ya? Okay, so when you're talking about seeing something, you're seeing with your naked eye, but shahada is going to be that, you understand thoroughly the context, and you basically understand a situation, you understand the context, you understand and comprehend fully what you had basically seen. In other words, you lived with it. And that's that shahada. That's why we would say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. You're relating with this shahada, with this witness, with this understanding, with this relationship of what you had basically understood, but you understood it to the core, that you adopted wholeheartedly. Okay, let's see. Halumma. What is halumma? So this is telling them, halumma, bring all. So when you say halumma in Lugha Arabiya, this basically would be either you're talking to one individual, or whether you're talking to a group of people. This is basically letting them, hey, you know what? Bring all your evidences. Now here, what you see in the Quran is that it's telling them, what? Gather, make your own groups, or make as individuals, whatever you want, go and seek your evidences. Why is the Quran challenging them and telling them to bring their evidences, or to bring their the support to their argument and tell them, you know what, gather in groups, do what you can, and all of that. That challenge is basically containing within it to let us know that the Quran was challenging them as a group, was not in fear of that, because Islam stands and the Quran stands on solid grounds. So knows what evidences that they might be bringing, knows exactly what flaws are within their ideas, and therefore the Quran comes in and says, well, you know what, here are the flaws in your arguments. Even if you were to combine, even if you were to gather, even if you were to somehow debate all of this, this is how we are going to basically expose the flaws within your argument. Of course, I don't want to go in details with the word halumma and what, you know, all the different usages in Lugha Arabiya. That's what al-Qurtubi wanted to basically get into, you know, just different types of how this word is basically used in Lugha Arabiya. So you could see halumma ilayna. So you could see this is probably this time and the other time in Surah Al-Ahzab. That were the only times when halumma was used, which basically means gather or come on, you know, in today's colloquial way of saying things. And of course, in the whole meaning, and this is what, you know, what we would be concerned about right there, the whole meaning was bring all your and present it if it has any foundation whatsoever. And of course, when you talk about halumma shuhada'akum, we talked about this ayah. I believe there was an equivalent ayah in Surah in Surah, was it in Nisa? I can't remember, in Surah Nisa. So I don't want to go in details with that one, because we went in details with, you know, challenging their evidences and all of that. And even al-Qurtubi, he just wanted to talk about the Lugha Arabiya piece of it, and how the different scholars of Lugha Arabiya, they basically had analyzed what that word is coming from. Is it come from ummu, or is it coming from I refer to you? In other words, I'm basically directing my words at you, etc. At the end, what we care about is that this was a challenge to all the disbelievers, and not only specifically at that time, but this was also al-ibra bi'umum al-lafzi la bi khusus al-sabab. This was including all the different disbelievers throughout history, and not exclusive to that time, that the Quran is basically challenging them to bring the evidences to support their ideas or support their claims, and then let it basically speak such evidences. And part of the evidences, go ahead and disprove the Quran if you may. Disprove the evidences in the Sahih al-Ahadith if you may. All right. So then, of course, فَإِن شَهِدُوا, and if they witness, then you, on the other hand, even if they were to witness, you know, or at least support one another, then you, on the other hand, فَلَا تَشْهَدْ مَعَهُمْ, don't witness with them, because at the end of the day, they're definitely going to be supporting one another, but you stand on firm grounds. And certainly you would basically stand on the Quran, you would stand on what the words of the Prophet ﷺ had basically said, and therefore recognize that they don't really have that evidence to prove it. Okay, وَقُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُ مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ. Here he says there are 14 different points, or at least different issues to talk about. And he said, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا, say come, in order to basically, for me to recite. I want you to look at the word right there, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا, meaning I want you to come and I will read upon you, as basically a recitation that contains certainty. exactly what based on what was revealed onto me from the Lord Almighty, and it is not based on speculation, not based on blasphemy as you had claimed. And then basically the ayat were coming in to give that demonstration of truth, demonstration of legislation, demonstration of aqidah basically, and it starts with Allah tushriku bihi shay'a, to not associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when it says ta'ala, this is talking about, come forward. And this is extremely important, that when you do da'wah, sometimes you have to bring in this person-to-person relationship. And this is what what you get, at least some of the wisdoms. Ta'ala, you tell them, I want you to come, some type of a missionary type of thing. I want you to come. Let's get closer. I want you to attend. Invite them to the masjid. Invite them to perhaps your areas, your circles. I don't know, you're doing a potluck, just invite them over. And what that does is that it breaks the fear, it breaks the tensions, it breaks a lot of different things. When you're inviting them, you're telling them, I want you to come closer. And this is something that you would get from this word, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا, come over. Now, what are you doing? You're inviting them to your spaces. Okay, you're inviting them to your spaces, and within this space, أَتْلُوا مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ. And then you basically would recite, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I would grab the Quran and start reciting right there, but this would be something that, one, you first break those, let's call them those stereotypes, or you probably break those hard feelings, those tensions. And once they're invited to your space, that's when they're capable of communicating, perhaps ask questions, perhaps maybe have personal relations, and perhaps want to see, or at least just witness how you pray, witness how you speak, and witness what the Muslim society looks like. And that's when you would be capable of presenting what? Well, presenting tawheed. That's the first thing that you want to present, tawheed, before you get into speaking about, I don't know, hijab day and demonstrating, I guess, certain things. That doesn't mean I worked as a chaplain for 3 years in St. Catherine University. I'll tell you, as somebody that was doing a lot of tabling, was doing a lot of different activities on college campus, and people would just come in, just ask questions, just want to break those barriers. And that's how people would show in the beginning their interest, just wanting, just interested in knowing what is behind this. I remember many times when I would be giving lectures at the University of Minnesota, or different college campuses, St. Cloud, and perhaps maybe Michigan, etc. Just different universities. And just by even seeing this woman dressed in niqab or dressed in hijab, or right now she's the person that is going to be speaking, they would think that you're not capable of speaking in English, not capable of answering questions, or even speaking to the crowd, etc. But once you start talking, that's when they start having that curiosity to hear more, to ask questions. And there were many situations where I spoke to crowds. It was crowds, men and women, and they would be just walking by, just literally walking by. A lot of these lectures were done in the cafeteria, where people are just coming in, buying a coffee, or buying any probably lunch or whatever it is, and they would be just coming in and just hearing a few words from just a passing by person, to a person that decides to just want to sit and just listen, and or even grab a Quran. And I've had I've had cases where people, they just came in, just not even interested necessarily to listen to a lecture, but from that point, that was their first time even hearing a Muslim woman talk, and that grabbed them, and later they did their shahada. It was just, just coming in and just wanting to, out of curiosity, just wanting to see what's there. And subhanAllah, just coming in and just joining, or probably just out of curiosity. And then from that moment of curiosity to then hearing what Islam says, and then later doing their shahada. I've had a number of different people actually do their shahada just by passing by. And I've had a case. This one was probably the most baffling. It until this day. So this Hindu called me, and he called me through Instagram, and he basically told me that he had been listening to my lectures, the Tafseer lectures, and that he was attracted to the lectures and attracted to Islam, and he was ready to do his shahada. And you're just listening to Tafseer lectures. You would think, I don't know, but I don't know which lecture he was listening to, but that's when he called, did his shahada, and then no communication continued until 6 months later. He said, I had my other friend who also listened to your lectures and wants to do his shahada. So his other friend, Hindu from India, calls and does his shahada 6 months later. And then a year later, he sends me a photo of his sister that had done her shahada through him, and a photo of his sister in Medina doing Umrah. That, every time I remember it, I just feel like I need to just cry. Alhamdulillah. I would never think of any of my lectures going that far, or even, you look at the views are definitely not in the hundreds of thousands to be out there. But subhanAllah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us al-ikhlas, give us the sincerity, and give us the acceptance, and make the words that we are teaching right there, words that would come out from the heart and reach the heart of those that seek guidance. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma ameen. Right. So just an idea about ta'ala, just invite in. You don't necessarily think that you will only get the reward by people accepting your da'wah. Just deliver the message. That's all you need to do. Just deliver it out there. You don't have to wait for people to respond. You don't have to wait for people to show up. Even if people don't accept your da'wah, don't worry about that. And that's one thing what I enjoy about, until today, I do prison chaplaincy through Zoom. Okay, I do prison, and I absolutely enjoy it. Absolutely enjoy it. And subhanAllah, those people would be coming in, not necessarily interested in hearing anything of what you might want to say, but just by them coming in and coming into those spaces, subhanAllah, without you realizing the word, just present the word of Islam. Don't change it to suit people's attention, or to suit people's views, or to suit people's likes. No. Present Islam as is. Don't change it to get more likes. Don't change it to get more acceptance. No. Just present Islam as is. And this is what you also get out of قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُ مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ. I'm just going to recite. I'm just going to let you know. I'm going to demonstrate for you what the religion really says. So whether you're talking about one person or whether you're talking about more. Hasina, I can see your hand is risen again, so I'm not really sure if this is just now or whether this was from before.
Sheikha, I raised it now. Is it okay for
Oh,
me to
okay.
ask my question?
Go ahead, dear.
I wanted to ask, everyone cannot do dawah, right? Because, for example, my intention is to do dawah, but I might I might do the dawah wrong. Maybe I can't present my dawah correctly. That's the reason I suppose everyone is not at a point to do dawah. Isn't that correct?
Okay.
Or everyone
Okay,
can?
let me explain, dear. There's a difference. We all have to do da'wah, even if you just know about Islam. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Everybody is supposed to do da'wah. But da'wah is at different levels. There's a huge difference between somebody that probably studied Islam and is an expert on Islam, and their level of da'wah is completely different. But each
Mhm.
and every single one of us is supposed to do da'wah. Dawah is not just to disbelievers. Dawah is even to your brothers, to your
Mhm.
sisters, to yourself even. Take that moment to educate yourself. That's you doing dawah to yourself, all right? To your neighbors, to the people on the street, no matter, I don't necessarily want you to, if it's, of course, in Afghanistan, I guess a conservative area for you to basically go do dawah, at least for the women, okay? Just do
Mhm.
it for the women. And we do da'wah in different ways. There's one way of da'wah where it's an action. You demonstrate it in action, in basically in your application. Actions speak louder than words.
Mhm.
That's
You're
one
right.
way of da'wah, that you show that your presentation of Islam, you learn it, you present it, and especially if we're talking about women, I would say your da'wah within your household to your brothers, taking the
Mhm.
time to teach them about Islam, about aqidah, about hadith, about taking the time to demonstrate Islam to them. That's your da'wah. That's your area of da'wah. Teaching your children, taking the time to teach your children about the way of doing wudu, the way of doing salah, or the way of sahaba, teaching them about etc. All of that, that's da'wah too. Da'wah is not exclusive to disbelievers. Okay, da'wah is
Mhm.
to everyone. Your children, your mother, your father, at home, to Muslims, to neighbors, to non-Muslims, etc. Da'wah can be in one presentation, in you basically presenting a good role model. Two, there's also the verbal one where you are basically explaining of what you know and what you had learned. And certainly the area that you don't want to, I would say, get into is when you don't know an answer to something, just say, I
Mhm.
don't know, and seek the resources to help you answer that question. So if you don't know something, just say, I don't know. That's the first thing. Just learn how to say, you know what, I need to research. I really don't know the answer to that question. And
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with it. Okay. That's the area that you want to make sure you don't cross. But other than that, no, each and every single one of us is supposed to be doing da'wah within their area, within I guess their own community, and definitely is not exclusive to scholars. Definitely not exclusive to scholars. Never
So,
is
Sheikh,
exclusive.
if we make a mistake unintentionally, that doesn't, I mean, we won't be accountable for that, isn't that right?
Well, how do you make a mistake unintentionally? I mean,
I
unless
mean,
I was driving a
or
car and
you'll,
then hit somebody by accident, that's a completely different thing. But if I'm talking, are you accidentally speaking?
no, by accident, I mean, if I do a mistake, I mean, I did my dawah or yelled and I said something that I must not, but it wasn't intentionally, and I mean, I won't be accountable for that, isn't that right?
Okay. So two things. Number one, if you thought an information was right, and then
Mm-hmm.
later on, you basically discovered that, oh, that hadith is actually not authentic.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You won't be held accountable for that because up until this day, this is what you know. Okay. And then
Mm-hmm.
later on, you discovered that, oh, I was actually wrong on this one. Even scholars fall in this. They discovered that, oh, I was actually wrong on this one. And many times I would get corrected, and I would discover that, oh, this hadith turned out to be not authentic. I always thought it was. Okay. And it's not just me. I mean, I'm just a talibat ilm, but you've got great ulama that will also say the same thing. Remember, Abu Hanifa used to tell his students, I will say something today and I'll discover the fault of what I had said tomorrow, and then I will change it, etc. So then what would we do? We would basically right there see that even someone like Abu Hanifa, or even like a Shafi'i, he had one madhab in Iraq, and then later on basically he had a new madhab in Egypt. Okay, so this is absolutely fine. But what would be problematic is insisting, one, to not seek ilm, two, and insisting to be right when, of course, the evidences proved you wrong. That's arrogance. Okay? So seeking ilm is important for a da'iyah. And the other thing is that a da'iyah, they also have to understand their qualification. Okay, so what does that mean? So if you are, let's say, a student of ilm, all right, for example, okay, I've got a PhD in Sharia, studied, and basically, had done a number of different classes. I've been teaching Islam for 23 years, but I do not qualify to be a mujtahid. I do not qualify to be a person that probably is a debater on Islam. I don't qualify for that. I don't have the skill for it. And for a mujtahid, I don't have the ilm for it to be a mujtahid. Or even a grand mufti. I'll give a fatwa here and there, but I can't be a grand mufti. That's a different level of qualification. So recognizing your qualification and recognizing what you are capable of doing, and this isn't necessarily that, yeah, I know how to do it. No. This is an endorsement by other scholars. This is an endorsement by other scholars. And having that wara, and having that wara where you recognize that this is a serious issue here that relates to deen, all right? You don't make things up. It's so easy to manipulate the masses and somehow, feel that I'm gaining social authority. But guess what? Whoever thinks that the social authority is that somehow they manage to get that kind of acceptance. No, you're seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept you, not people. So if a person is making up certain information or certain things about Islam because they don't want to appear stupid, then that's فَلْيَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَهُ مِنَ النَّارِ. نَسْأَلُ اللَّهَ الْعَفْوَ وَالْعَافِيَةَ. And they had definitely guaranteed their place, a position, and a place in hellfire. So what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to recognize that da'wah is more than demonstrating it into action, but we have to seek ilm, and we have to also be humble enough when we have the wrong information to correct it, and also let others know that I was wrong on this, and here's what the correct information is, if you're capable of doing so, unless they're all gone. But da'wah is a responsibility on all of us. You don't have to be a alim to be a da'iyah. You don't have to be a absolutely not. You have to, each and every single one. Al-amr bil-ma'ruf and nahy al-munkar within your area is a responsibility upon each and every single Muslim. Do what you can. Do what you can. You've got a friend doesn't wear hijab, I'm going to tell her about Islam and hijab and go and bring the evidences. I've got a friend who doesn't pray, etc. I'm going to go and tell her about the prayer and how it's a pillar of Islam, etc. I've got a friend who probably maybe drinks. I'm going to tell her why drinking is haram, etc. So, I know you shouldn't be, around these kind of friends, but let's just use the word acquaintances, okay? Definitely do not be around these kind of friends, okay?
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikha.
وإياكم. All right, so let's see right there. And of course, the other time that the word ta'alaw is for a group of men and women, and ta'alay is for a woman. So you could see in the Quran in Surah Al-Ahzab, فَتَعَالَيْنَ أُمَتِّعْكُنَّ وَأُسَرِّحْكُنَّ صَرَاحًا جَمِيلًا. فَتَعَالَيْنَ. So ta'alayn is the same root as ta'alaw, but the ta'alaw is because it was speaking to a plural of men or a plural of men and women. Ta'alayn is speaking to a plural of women, i.e. that is basically the Prophet ﷺ's wives. Okay? All right, let's see right there. ما حرم ربكم. Oh dear, we actually exceeded the time. And I promised 1 hour. So here's what I'll do, inshallah. I'll end it right here, okay? Because anyways, there's Salat al-Jumu'ah. I'll end it right here. And we'll come back, inshallah, tomorrow with the fiqh of marriage. I'm excited. Remember that, how to make your house a home? So do join us tomorrow. We've got a lot of things to talk about. And especially once we get into that mapping of that priority. So yeah, stay tuned because there's, inshallah, the coming up lectures in the fiqh of marriage. There's also going to be the fiqh of divorce. It's part of the fiqh of marriage, and also child custody and rights and responsibilities upon husband and wife. So yeah, there's a lot that's going to be explained, inshallah. So inshallah, if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah. I know in the US, they have Thanksgiving, okay? They have Thanksgiving right now, and yeah, it's cooking right there. But yeah, I'm in Malaysia, so yeah, we don't have any Thanksgiving.